All right, YouTube. For a very long time, when I was a kid, people were talking about peak oil and how oil was going to decline and we'd run out like within 10 years or something. That obviously didn't happen. We now know there's a significantly larger amount of oil on this planet than we ever thought back in the 70s through the 90s. Part of that was just fear mongering. Of course, at the same time, they said that the world was entering another ice age really quickly and we'd all be frozen by the time we were old. Now they're saying, of course, we're all going to get, flooded out because the seas will magically rise 10 feet every 10 seconds or some crap like that. But 20 billion, now not million with an M, billion with a B, barrels of oil have been found to be residing in one field within the Permian Basin in Texas. It's shale oil. There are apparently multiple levels of this shale oil. And what you do is you frack it apart and then you can extract it and you get natural gas and oil and all of these things. Now, I've said before, I'm not a huge proponent of fracking. I see it as a stopgap between sort of the fossil fuel era and what I imagine to be inevitable, which is eventually green energy will be more efficient, it will be cheaper, it's just a matter of time. I think that we should continue fracking and extracting oil and gas temporarily and invest some of that money in trying to increase green energy technology. For instance, I don't know why we even have centralized power distribution anymore. It's woefully inefficient. It makes more sense to have like home solar, home wind, and generate it at the source so that you're not losing some of that energy potentially. It makes no sense to transport fuel around physically speaking. We transport it by ship, by pipeline, and so forth. It's much less efficient than home generation where feasible to do so. We haven't even remotely begun to approach the limit of efficiency with regards to appliances, with regards certainly to computer systems and so forth. We're barely we're barely in the copper age when it comes to these things. So I don't believe in like peak computing, peak energy, peak efficiency being anywhere nearby on the horizon, maybe 50 years from now or something like that with current levels of technology. But we can certainly make the world far more efficient. We can generate things in a more cleanly manner. This idea of like scrubbing CO2 using like filtration systems and stuff, that's nonsense. It's probably that would destabilize the planet. You'd probably see too little CO2 around. We'd have to start burning more fossil fuel or the plants would start dying eventually. I think it's crazy. But we are undergoing in the United States a massive, massive energy boom. People haven't even realized the one biggest thing that Obama did during his presidency, before lame duck status, which is now, currently, actually, for the last year or so. The best thing that he did was step out of the way and not bow to pressure from environmental groups and the far left on fracking and our gas and oil expansion. We've got a huge amount of energy. We probably have a huge amount more that we haven't even surveyed, we haven't even found yet. We probably have some of the largest energy reserves on the face of the earth. We probably have much more gas than Russia, more oil than Venezuela. Other countries probably have a great amount of oil that they haven't tested for either, because previously the methods didn't exist to extract it and or to test for it at certain depths in certain areas. Yeah, it's there. We've probably also got diamonds and gold and all sorts of other good shit lying around unextracted in the earth. Now, I will say as a conservationist, I wouldn't think we need to scarify every square inch of the landscape to extract all this stuff. It is still a temporary measure. We do need to move towards a green energy future, but I don't believe that beating up on oil, gas, and coal is the way to do it. I believe the free market is the way to do it. Our protection, actually, our subsidies for oil, in part are responsible for the woes of green energy, as well as bureaucratic regulations. If you try to install home solar, you end up paying thousands of dollars just for the fees and regulations involved, let alone the actual cost of the system itself. If we did away with those regulations, slashed them apart, either we could even get rid of the subsidy at that point because it would cancel itself out. The amount of capital necessary to put up such a system would be thousands of dollars less. A whole new class of people, which is the solid middle class, would then be capable of affording these systems without having to take out loans and crap like that. Over time, they'd expand their solar array or they'd put it all up at once or something like that. It's a good idea. But let's not kid ourselves. We're not at peak oil. We're not anywhere near peak oil. We're 100 years from peak oil. We haven't even barely begun to extract all of this lower oil that we couldn't get at before with any great deal of efficiency to turn a profit. Now we can, and that's great. I mean, it'll sustain our economy for literally a century just from that. But in that interim period, we do need to start getting serious about getting government out of the way in a regulatory fashion on green energy so that it can expand more. Because the more it expands, the more slowly we will gobble up our fossil fuel resources, extending the timeline at which point we will eventually run out of obtainable fossil fuels. It doesn't even mean on an absolute basis. Imagine that we frack everything, or take a different example. Imagine that all the oil that we could have pumped we had already exhausted. Our economy would be on life support right now, and we'd really be hurting. And then we'd have no choice but to mass subsidize home solar and wind fields and stuff like that, and getting more uranium from more nuclear plants and so forth. We'd have to mine up a whole bunch of coal. Things would be all sorts of screwed up. We can't wait until that now obtainable fossil fuel material begins to be exhausted to actually take steps to move to what is essentially the next epoch of human development, which is we no longer need to extract resources. We have the means to passively generate our own electricity, to generate the energy that we need for most intents and purposes. Natural gas is fine. That'll last several centuries. Coal will last 300 years if we were to maximize our usage of it. That's how much we've got. China has coal. Russia has coal. Everyone has coal. We all have some degree of oil. Even some of the European states have oil. Scotland has quite a bit of oil offshore as well. But no, we're nowhere near peak oil. The United States is the powerhouse of the next century based on its energy production. But we do have to also, from an economic standpoint, the more green energy we're using, the more passive generation of electricity we have here, the more fuel potentially we can also export, because we can extract it with such greater efficiency than many of these other states. There would be people buying our crude oil for a change, or our refined gasoline and so forth. It'd be very, very funny to see the tables switched. All of a sudden Saudi Arabia has to buy our gas or something like that. And that's the other point. I think we should generate it domestically because we have the capability to make every one of these processes cleaner, and we can directly benefit from it without having to worry about piracy, without having to worry about some oil tanker spilling it out at sea and things like that. We don't have to worry about funding terrorism if we stop doing business with some of these tin-horn third world regimes in the Middle East buying their oil. I think we should get any foreign oil that we need from Venezuela, because they'll sell it to us potentially cheaper, number one. We could draw them into trade, number two. They would experience less social alienation at that point, less fiscal stress. Perhaps they would begin to leave, Marxism behind at some point, because they would see that the United States is not the boogeyman that their socialist leaders have told them. But yeah, there is an oil boom going on in Texas. A lot of people some time ago thought, oh, the oil fields in Texas are basically played out. Yeah, we get, however many barrels. It's a drop in the bucket. It's like 1% of production or something. Now we find out, oh yeah, there's actually an enormous amount of oil there, and now we can finally obtain it. Texas economy is about to skyrocket. Texas is sort of the place to be right now within the United States. The Dakotas, too. They apparently have an enormous amount of gas and oil to extract. Like I said, I'm not the world's biggest proponent of fracking. It does environmental damage, and we should move towards green energy. But we can't do that by beating up on the fossil fuel industry and harming our own economy in the process. What we end up then doing is simply importing the same fossil fuels from regimes that in many cases would stab us in the back at a moment's notice if they could get away with it. So yeah, I think we should domestically produce as much as possible. Use some of that revenue even to subsidize solar, potentially, to subsidize at least research into making it more efficient so it can compete in a private market. It's already gotten many times more efficient in the last few decades. It doesn't have that much further to go before it is as efficient as some of these fossil fuels. I understand, like, oh, well, lithium mining and stuff like that creates all sorts of hazards. Yeah, it does, admittedly. We need to work on that too. The solar panel in its current form is not the final form in which that technology will exist. Trust me. There are other arrangements that you can use to generate solar electricity. We simply haven't tested them fully enough to actually use them. They can also 3D print wafer-thin solar panels that generate the same amount of electricity. You're not going to convince me that that creates as much chemical waste as the kind of clunky old thick panels that people typically have been mounting on their homes. We can even paint these panels onto surfaces now. You can buy windows that conduct electricity. You can buy stuff you can put on an electric car to conduct a great amount of electricity to generate it. It is possible. The limits of human technology are nowhere near achieved in the energy sector in any measurable way. That's about all. Peace out.